Welcome to Unpolished Stories, speaking beyond the spotlight. Thanks for joining us again today. This series is part of Virtual Speakers Association International. So whether you are listening to the podcast available now on more and more platforms through our audio release, or you're joining us on video through our YouTube channel and beyond, we're grateful. This podcast is a new experiment for Chantelle and I, looking at stories beyond the stage, like what's really going on or what can we learn from each other about not only this business, but how we need to take care of each other in the process as we learn and we grow and we elevate our passion, our business to the next level. So we're excited to bring you this conversation as part of this episode. And with that, Chantelle, it's nice to be back with you in this format today. Thank you for taking on
Ah,
this challenge together.
Celina, I always enjoy these chats that we have, even the ones that we don't record.
Yeah, right? Right. Chantelle, you and I have been doing a lot of talking about our own stories and what led us to put some volunteer time, right, into this endeavor. And I would love to hear a story on your mind this morning. What's something that you've recently experienced where you went, oh, that would be something others could benefit from your learning moment?
Absolutely. And there's always a little bit of humility involved in telling these
There
stories,
is.
you know.
Yes.
So I kind of stuck my foot in it the other day. I was hosting a webinar and I popped a QR code up on screen, and I thought I was very with it and very progressive using my QR codes until I saw someone say in the chat box, "I'm blind. Do you have a link handy?" And I went, I don't have a link handy because, of course, I close all my windows, minimize distractions, right? And I felt like a right chop. I stood there sat there for a moment and I thought, Chantelle, inclusivity, right? Um, Safe to say I haven't made that mistake again. It was a very valuable lesson for me. After the webinar, I still sent the lady an email. I apologized to her because this is not how I want to show up, right? But I'm going to come back to what I've always said, Celina, on this show. We are people first, we are speakers second. I'm human. I made a human mistake. God, let me never make it again, but I did learn my lesson.
I think your phrase has been one of our guiding lights in these conversations of human first, speaker second. And part of this conversation today even digs deeper in that, in the fact that we're all learning. And when we
Yeah.
start with a space that we're all trying to do our best, and that's really what the speaker community has been about, is how do we support each other and
Mm,
taking this to the next level. And there will always be some who don't want to, and that's fine. We're probably,
correct.
we're gonna we'll try to bring them along, but they can choose not to. And we're gonna continue to connect with people that want to learn and support each other. And those moments where we can say, hey, I'm not sure you're aware, when that
Mm,
happened, this was the response. And I don't want you to have to go through that again. And what
yeah.
opportunities we have to do that for each other in that moment you had. What I also love about your story this morning is that, oh, that's one of the trending things, right? Put a QR code on everything. And just
Correct.
because it is the new something, it may not work
Mm,
for everybody, right? So those
yeah.
things that do kind of take us down a road of, oh, this is the latest and greatest tack, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But really good learning, really, really good learning. And when you learn a painful lesson, I think it solidifies. You just are so aware of it going forward. And that's honestly how I feel now about QR codes. Very, very aware.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us this morning. Chantelle,
Mm.
would you introduce our speaker and guest today and tell us more?
Well, I am really excited to be hosting Rikki Arundel today. Now, Rikki is a speaking coach and gender inclusion speaker. They help leaders to improve profits by delivering speeches that people actually remember and by creating LGBTQ inclusive workplaces where people can be their true selves. I think this is such a topical thing. More people need to be talking about it. And as we saw, even I've put my foot in it. So speakers need to really start becoming more inclusive. Rikki, welcome. It's so good to have you on the show with us today.
Good to be with you. Really, really good.
Amazing. Amazing. Now, Rikki, we bantered a little bit before we started the show, and I said to you, I normally get my pronouns wrong, and this always makes me nervous, right? So I'd love to hear from you. Part of your mission is to make organizations more LGBTQ inclusive, to help people get their pronouns right, and to do and say all the right things. Now, I'm sure you're aware of people who've made similar mistakes to what I have. Could you perhaps share some insight into how we can do better, how we can talk about these things more openly?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically that's it. We just have to start to learn to talk about it. I had some problems with my eye earlier, or last year and this year, and I've pretty much lost vision in my left eye. So I'm now partially sighted. That means I've had to really start thinking about my desktop. Everything's now in dark mode because I see white on black is much clearer. It's the white that glares and that actually then wipes out the letters. If you do some nice, lovely orange on yellow type, I can't see that at all. It's just gone. I'm seeing nothing at all. So, and I've had problems as well. Being in the day doing a presentation with a slide. Okay, fine, you can see from this slide. Well, all the visually impaired people can't. If you don't, as a speaker, think, right, I'm going to put a slide up, but if you're relying on everybody being able to see the slide, they may not be able to. I have a friend, a speaker friend who is partially deaf, got significantly deaf. She does a lot of work on virtual stuff, trying to help people to understand how do you make sure that you've got captions that can come up so that you can actually read what's happening. We're the Virtual Speakers Association. How often are we speaking to a group of people for whom English is not their first language?
Correct.
And that includes most Generation Z. The English ones. Barely speak English anyway because they text speak.
They speak tech.
Yeah, speak text, or they're basically into the hip hop culture, so they've got a completely new language. And I'm thinking, oh my God. But so we have, and it helps to be able to learn to use things that actually help. Inclusivity is about trying to think about, is there some way in which when I do this presentation, there are people who will feel I can't relate to this. We have to just try and think about how do we make sure that everybody gets the message. And that's the big issue that I have in all the coaching I'm doing and everything. I know that's one of the questions we're talking about later was about, I just think we've got to be so careful about making absolutely sure that we do not overload our audience with way too much information. Because, if you're not particularly well educated, I did a master's degree, was going to go on to do a PhD until I realized that my language was becoming inaccessible because I was learning academic language and I was learning all these big, 3, 4, 5 syllable words that nobody understood. And there's no point in delivering a presentation like that everybody sits there thinking, what? So it's
true.
Interesting. The journey of changing gender has been such a big change. Now, back to the pronouns. If somebody looks female, use female pronouns. If they look male, use male pronouns. If you're not sure, ask.
Now, wow. That just takes my whole stress levels down a whole bunch of notches.
This is it. Simple as fact. If I present as female, I'm going to use female toilets because the world is gendered into a binary. Toilets and facilities and everything else tend to be just for male or female. So I identify now as non-binary, and there's a good reason for that. I lived for 50 years as a man. I then transitioned, and that was a massive social shock for me, learning just how different life is as a woman to as a man. And I just don't think, even though, you know, with Me Too and everything else, we've been shouting about it and telling the world, look, this is just not okay. People still aren't getting it. The world is totally different. I was reading some stuff on NLP last night, literally, and as I was reading it, it was about the way in which the map that we see, the world that we see, is totally different. That I make some, you know, some comments, I make some statement, but, you know, Celine's in America, you're in Australia, I'm in Britain. There's a fair chance, even though we're speaking the same language, that you won't understand what I said. Because if I use a brand name that only appears on the UK high streets, it's totally meaningless. And I had some stories where I used I used to use years ago where I was particularly talking about cars, until I realized I was doing this talk to a largely American audience, and I suddenly thought, I can't use that. They won't know what a Ford Anglia is. They won't know what a Ford Cortina is, because they don't have them there. So it means that I used to think there's no image in your head. There's no anchor from an NLP perspective to what I'm talking about. So I had to rethink the whole story and use American cars so the American audience would understand what I was saying.
You used a phrase of anchor, and that just really stood out to me as a way for all of us, just even that pause. You know, we think about, we're prepping for our audience. We need to think like our audience. What are those things they need from us? And so we need to pay attention to our own anchors of where we're coming from and remind ourselves, right, that how does this sound from, it's just that pause to prep a little bit more, right? Think about how we include people through this power of spoken word. Yeah.
As speakers, I use stories all the time, and I know we're going to probably get back into stories a little bit later for more as well. I never knew where it happened. That's actually what happened with story. I'm going to Google this because it's actually quite an interesting story. I got invited to do some the very first virtual stuff that I've ever done was about 10 years ago now. Somebody said, could you do a series of talks on storytelling? I said, oh, never done that. It wasn't a topic I'd actually talked about. Because at the time, 10 years ago, storytelling wasn't part of the vocabulary of speaking. We were still talking, I don't know why, it hadn't become the big in thing. Now everybody, there's so many books on it, it's crazy. So I said, yeah, okay. Why did you ask me to do this? Because it's not something I speak about normally. I said, well, I was listening to some of your talks and you just packed them full of stories.
Fantastic.
So
there's a use for them.
So I thought, right, okay. And so I did some research and looked at Aristotle and all the other bits and pieces and created a quite good program. And I now do talk about it a lot more. And then I thought, where did the storytelling come from? I've never been taught storytelling. Okay, I've always done a bit of writing, but I've never really been an author. My partner's the author. And then I suddenly realized I have a great story about how my dad was responsible for sinking the Bismarck in World War II. Wow. I have stories about how he had battles with herds of elephants in the Indian jungle during World War II. I suddenly remembered I could write an entire book just on the stories that my dad told about his life. How he became a boxer because he was caught climbing from one window to another on the outside of a building, and they made him go into the boxing ring, and he decided he'd have to win this, otherwise he was going to get, and he beat the camp champion. So the next thing he knew, he was now the camp boxer. So there were all these incredible stories I grew up in a pub, so he was a landlord of the pub, so he was always telling stories, and I thought that was it. I grew up with stories all the time, all these amazing stories, and I've just done the same. It just carried on. I just found whenever I'm doing something, if I want to make a point, where's the story?
Yeah.
Not always mine, sometimes somebody else's, but just find a great story.
Sure. So I would add to that, we're aware, as you shared, you were a founding member of PSA UKI, right? And early on, like 1999, and you've seen some stuff, and I bet there's some stories from there. Would you share with us something you remember that was really important to you early on that still applies today?
I was a very active member of Toastmasters. I joined in 1990. I won the British Championship. I've won the Britain and Ireland evaluation championship a couple of times. Never managed to get into to the actual World Championships. Just I think part of the problem was I was a professional speaker, and I know that there were people thinking, it's not fair. So that would sometimes happen, but it didn't matter. But I didn't want to be, that wasn't where I wanted to be going. I wanted to be a professional speaker. I joined Toastmasters because it was a way to be able to practice little bits, little 5-minute segments and things. And it's a great way to get feedback on little bits that become then parts of your speeches. But there was nothing for professional speakers. And I was talking to a friend at one of the clubs, and he said, well, have you thought of joining the NSA? I said, the National Security? No. The National Speaking Association.
The other one.
Hey,
listen, we speak.
The National Speaking. I'd never even heard of it. Is there is a National Speaking? Okay, fine. So I looked up National Speaking Association, discovered there were just 6 UK members. And I thought, oh, this is good. This looks like a good thing. I actually contacted a couple of them, talked to them, and one of them, a guy called Alan Law, said, "You've got to come to the convention." So what's this? They said, in July, got this fabulous convention. It's going to be in Minneapolis, and you can come. So off I flew to Minneapolis, joined the NSA, went off to Minneapolis, and I absolutely blew me away. I came back I went there passionate about becoming a speaker. I came back a professional speaker. I just knew we had to do something like this in the UK. It was just, and I had some friends in the insurance industry. Life insurance industry in the UK was one of the biggest opportunities for speakers. There were big conventions held, also the Institute of Sales and Marketing Management. So we had sales and it was very, very much around sales, the big conventions, the big speaking gigs, the kind of thing I was interested in, which was sales and marketing, was always going to be insurance industry or increasingly sales. So spoke to Brendan, said, yeah, we've got to do this. This is something we've got to do. And I spoke, it was probably a couple of years of just talking to people to try and find people who would want it, because it actually takes a lot of energy to put an association together and get it up and running. I had lots of Toastmaster contacts, lots of insurance industry contacts, and I'd met Warren Evans while I was in the States, and he was saying, look, we're going to build this. Yeah, we're going to try and get the NSA to become the International Speakers, ISA, International Speakers Association. NSA board said, not a chance. We're the National Speakers Association. We're not changing it. And yeah, the Australians, NSA Australia, were saying, we don't really want to be part of the NSA in Australia. So Warren said, right, we're going to create the International Federation for Professional Speaking. And we thought, yeah, that sounds good. And then suddenly Warren sent me and I said, I've had an inquiry from somebody else who wants to set something up. A guy called Rex Warner. So we tracked him down. He's an explorer. This is a guy who sailed a raft across the Pacific Ocean and cannot swim.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 6,000 miles, just to prove that the Chinese could have actually reached America.
Good Lord.
Anyway,
love it.
He came into it, and he was much more involved in Britain then. Even now, it was very heavily dominated by celebrity speakers. So it was all about names rather than about people, who were speakers. So Rex came in, he brought a few other people in, and I contacted a couple of people in Toastmasters, said, do you want to get involved? We had somebody from the States, Craig Hampton, who was living in the UK, a lot of NSA connections. So we just got this group of us together, and that was it. We were going to launch in 98, just didn't get the timing right, and it was beginning to get too close to Christmas. So we said, no, we'll push for January.
it
So
was.
January
Yeah.
30th, 1999. That was it. We
Gosh,
we had 120 people at that first meeting. So it was
that is amazing. Well done.
purely from contacts. It was no real marketing. We just literally, it was just, just invite your friends, invite your contacts, that come on in, and that was it. So
It
Wow.
reminds me of just how important those connections are, right? That's the staying power behind that is when you feel connected, you're more likely to put the energy into, I'm willing to contribute my time, my effort, other resources when we feel those connections.
yeah, so it's
You've been,
25 years this year.
wow. Yes.
Gosh.
Anniversary. So
Yeah.
it's amazing.
You've shared with us too, not only as a storyteller, but as a speaker in this business, as a professional speaker for over 40 years. What do you attribute your staying power to? How have you adapted through all of that and you're still here talking with us about professional speaking today?
I don't know. I mean, I've never set out to become a professional speaker. I was going to become a nuclear engineer, and I failed all my A levels, dumped that. And then a friend of mine said, "Why don't you join the drama group at college?" And I said, "All right." And that was partly due to the fact that I discovered they had only got one changing room for everybody. So there were a couple of very attractive actresses in that group. But I was an 18-year-old boy, and despite being secretly trans, that just sounded like a lot of fun. And they were doing. They always did the play that was in the sort of the national exams, and it was Julius Caesar, and the part of Antony was up for grabs. So I learnt most of the big friends, Romans, countrymen speech, which is probably one of the most powerful motivational speeches that ever has been written. If you look at that speech and the way Antony turns a hostile crowd that want to rip him to pieces into a baying mob that chases after the conspirators, absolutely brilliant speech. But Shakespeare was just such a brilliant speaker, and I learned so much from doing that. But I also, it meant, because when I got the part, the director said, "Look, you're not actually good enough." But oh, really? I said, "So I want you to do as much, join some of the drama classes." And it turned out I was free when all the drama classes, apart from one, were available. So I ended up doing a drama course I hadn't planned to do. But it changed my whole way of thinking, because all of a sudden I loved being on stage. I loved the whole performance thing. At the end of that year, I shot off to I don't know whether you've ever heard of Butlins. It's basically a holiday camp for families in the UK. And what's famous in Butlins are the redcoats, which are the entertainers. So I went to Butlins as a redcoat entertainer, just a general duties entertainer. Did a bit of singing, bit of dancing, I was a good ballroom dancer. So I just absolutely loved the whole performance thing. And that was what sort of took me in. And I think more than anything else, that's been the driver, this passion for performance. And I remember speaking.
And I can see it still. You're good at it. You're good at it, right?
Yes.
I am wrapped.
I was speaking to a friend of mine, Wayne Pickering, the Mango Man from Daytona Beach. And I said, Wayne, 10 years on, what do you wish you'd known 10 years ago when you started that you know now? He said, "Oh, that's easy. This is show business." And I thought, got it. That is so insightful, because it is. Yeah, I could write a speech and send it to you. You don't need to come. You don't need to be in the meeting. Why do you come? Because you want me to entertain you. You want to be engaged and have some fun and come away feeling empowered. And that's what we've got to do as speakers. We've got to make sure that if we're the only keynote speaker, we are the entertainment slot. It's with content, but the audience wants to feel, really high when they go out thinking, "Wow, that was brilliant."
And I think, as we've, as this podcast came to fruition, as Chantelle and I've had these conversations of, that pull, right? We want that performance, we want that impact.
Yeah.
And yet we also know, as we've been trying to kind of bring out in this series of conversations, is what goes on behind the scenes, right? So we we were talking about, is there a common myth, you think, or myths in the speaking industry, or just some unspoken truths, right, that you have encountered, that, or that you've had to overcome in terms of the perception of this profession?
I think there is a perception somehow that speakers earn huge amounts of money, and some speakers do. But I think the speaking industry is a bit like the acting industry. There are a few people who earn huge amounts of money, and then there's the rest of us who just about get by, and do what we can. Now, there are ways to change that, and we know that very often the speakers who make a lot of money are often the ones who've managed to develop some product which sells really well. Some speakers do get huge amounts of money, but if you're going to book, if you're going to pay 50 grand for a speaker, you're going to book Boris Johnson or somebody else. You're going to book a name. And that's an interesting thing. Yeah, I was at a convention in, I think it was Dallas, and it was one of the early meetings. Warren Evans used to run these meetings which were about international speakers, trying to get the international speakers together, and I had the opportunity to ask one question and get 5 minutes of answers from top international speakers. And my question was, I said, the UK industry is very heavily dominated by celebrities. What do I need to do to become a celebrity? And I got lots and lots of different suggestions and answers came in. And then somebody said, Rikki, being a celebrity means being celebrated for something. What do you want to be celebrated for?
Love that.
Right there.
Oh, I thought, wow. And I didn't know the answer to that. Interestingly, it was Chris Clark Epstein's convention, and the whole theme of her question was about good questions. And I came away from that, and driving back home up to Hull, and this question's rattling around my mind, and this voice, and I don't know where it came from. It was not my voice. It was like a voice from somewhere else, so loud in my head. It said, be celebrated for being transgender.
Yeah.
I said, oh, don't be silly. Well, actually, that's not what I said, but this is being recorded. I can't do that. That will kill me. That will destroy me. This was my big secret. This is the thing nobody could ever know. I'd been terrified anybody would find out. Only ever told 4 people. I'm 50 years old, and I only ever told 4 people in my life that I was trans secretly.
Wow.
But by the end of that year, I decided I was going to come out. Came out in the December, and within 6 months, my business was flat on its back, absolutely stopped dead. People even on the phone when I said, "Oh, you do know I'm transgender," and they said, "What? Oh, no, cancel, sorry, can't handle that."
Gosh.
So it was it, and the few who did book me said, I had so much pressure not to book you. And it's about the fear of it's stigmatization by association. This fear that if I book this person who's trans, who's very different, and it doesn't work, or the audience, my audience don't like it, or get criticism, I'm going to be, the meeting planner, and then going to be having to face that. So I'll play safe. I'll book somebody who's a safe bet. And there were no other transgender speakers. I searched the internet everywhere. Not a single person was saying that I'm a speaker and I'm transgender. A lot more now.
Yeah.
I think that's changed. But then it was just, it just wasn't going to go. So, one of those tough times that I had it. I literally then had to go to university. I did a master's degree in gender. I came out of that, got heavily involved with the whole. There was a lot of legal changes taking place in the UK, I set up a social enterprise. My speaking industry had literally gone on the back burner, and then I started speaking at universities, and then beginning to start speaking for local authorities and the National Health Service and things. Massively changed the income profile, because all of a sudden I'm dealing with organizations for whom, where previously I'd been easily getting 3,000, now it was we struggle to get to 1,000. We can do 750. So it was a massive difference, and I think a lot of women face this, that men get much bigger fees than women, because there is some sense that you don't quite have the authority of men. But so the myths about the earning are a bit strange. It isn't. I think the best speakers I have heard don't do this for big fees. They do this because they have a passion to change the world. This is my
Yes.
helping change the world one speech at a time. This is what we do. We speak because we want to change the world. We want people to change their behavior and do things differently tomorrow. And if you give them too much information, they won't do that. One message, one call to action, one thing to go do. And then there's a possibility that if yours is better than the rest of the speakers on the program, they will actually remember what you said. But give them 10 things to do, no chance. They won't remember a thing. They write it down in a notebook, and I've got a whole shelf on my bookcase full of notebooks from speeches over the past 40 years. I never look at them.
But you know what I'm hearing, Rikki, in that story? I'm hearing such a call to authenticity. And we started this show by saying we are humans first, we are speakers second.
Yeah.
And it was a hard road that you walked, but you honored that call to be celebrated for being you. And I love that.
Okay.
So as we bring this conversation to maybe a next last question, what is one question you wish we would have asked you as we were preparing for today, and all the things that you can bring to this conversation, and speakers at all stages of their career, maybe somebody who's just even thinking about, do I even want to become a professional speaker? What do you wish we would have asked you?
Oh, I see. I had a couple of questions down here, and then I've actually answered the questions already.
Oh, good. Anything else you want to add?
But I think one of the things about this profession which I love is I'm 74 now, and I can't see a possibility of ever retiring. It's it's one of those things. I'm in this for life. It's something I have a complete and total passion for doing. And what's happening is that what I talk about, it gets narrower and narrower and narrower. A massive amounts of experience, but it's getting down to the thing I'm most passionate about. And what I'm most passionate now is, I think at that age, I still want to be doing some speeches. I'm still doing a few. I'm getting a few nice awards mostly for having been around a long time. It's when you get lifetime achievement awards start coming at you when you're this age, and I wish I got this year. I get concerned when I see speakers who are using other people's material. And I've actually, I'm sure both of you have heard a recording of Reverend Norman Vincent Peale's brilliant, why positive thinkers get positive results speech. And I can probably recite most of that by heart. I've heard it so many times. But when I heard a top speaker get on stage and actually deliver it as if, pretending it was his content, and watched the experienced people in the audience literally get up and leave, I thought, this is crazy. I had a conversation with Cabot Robert once, and he said he'd gone into a meeting and delivered his speech. It was his primary keynote speech, and it just went down like a sack of potato. It was absolute, watch it. He said, I don't understand it. It just didn't connect. I said, what was wrong? He said, oh, we had a speaker last year did the same speech. Somebody had actually delivered his keynote speech. This is, so I want to get people to start realizing that, we all have this incredible wealth of stories. Everything we do is a story. I'll give you an example of just what I mean by that. I was walking through a park one day, saw a woman with her young son, and there was a log. It was a tree, had fallen down, they'd cut off all the branches and left it there for kids to climb on. And it's about probably almost twice the height of this kid. He's standing up on the top of this log. So he's about sort of, 2-3 foot high. The log's really up high. And I could see that he was preparing to jump. You could actually see his whole body beginning to swing as he getting ready to jump. And his mother was just nonchalantly looking out over the lake, not paying any attention. And he suddenly jumped. She screamed, grabbed his leg, and the poor kid went down head first, banged his head on the bump of the tree. I thought,
Oh, my word.
and then I thought, I wonder how many times in his life since then has he been about to take a big leap and do something that took courage and faith to go for it, and thought, I won't do that, just because somebody messed up his first leap.
Yeah.
So you see how 2-second incident walking across the park, because that's all it took, just a couple of seconds, became a story that I can now use in all sorts of, all around us, everywhere we go, every minute of the day. Things are happening which are giving us stories that we can then turn to make a point, to help make our speeches better and make them stick.
I love that, the way you related that story, but particularly all the stories, Rikki. I've so enjoyed listening to you. I could listen for another hour. I think we're going to have to do a follow-up session.
We are.
But
I love it.
To bring it back to those stories, I talk about how we've got this barrage of information coming at us. We're all stuck in our heads. We're busy, 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 busy. And all it takes is just pausing and opening our eyes and seeing the world around us. We all have that ability.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing and inspiring us, Rikki. That's amazing.
So many pieces here. So if we could bring it back to one piece of advice that you would have given your earlier self, your earlier speaker self, what would you share with us?
It's back to the stories. I wish I'd understood when I started out that speakers are storytellers. I started out delivering technical speeches. My first actual speech, I was working in an insurance company, I was in the training department, and they said very clearly, you haven't been in sales, so you can't speak about sales. That's it, banned. You can only speak about technical stuff. But by this time, I was a fellow of the Chartered Insurance Institute, and I had loads of qualifications. So I was good on technical stuff, but nobody could understand it. So I learned, the first craft I learned was, how do you take something technical and convey it to people in a way that makes it understandable? So people didn't understand mortgages, and I put all these slides to get this is overhead projector slides with overlays and things.
I remember those.
You remember those?
I do.
We didn't even have electronic calculators back then. So anyway, we put all this together, and I created this brilliant speech. It really, really worked well, and I got a reputation for being able to make very complicated stuff look very, very simple. And that was, the background of my development as a speaker. Even when my first big speech, I did the whole thing. I created a story. I hadn't realized I had done. I created a story about a fictitious person who'd reached retirement and didn't have enough money, and just created the story of how bad that could be. That speech was still being used 10 years later to train people. It was literally, I was talking to an audience of life insurance salesmen about why they should buy life insurance. So it was quite a challenging thing, but it got me a sort of 4 or 5 minute standing ovation. It was a lot of work went into it. But if I'd understood the power of story back then, I think my speeches would have got better. My career would have been better. I would have actually developed a lot faster if I'd really got that it's all about stories, whatever happens, because stories help you to remember the speech. Stories help the audience to remember the speech, and they're entertaining. They're fun. Facts are not.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're accessible to everyone, not just speakers. You know, in your career, whatever your career is, you can use stories. As a
Yeah.
parent, you can use stories. And I think that's such a great message or a lesson for us.
Yeah. I love your point and your pull to that, Chantelle, with it helps people feel included, right? We get drawn in. Rikki, we've been drawn into every single story you've told in this short time together because
Oh,
that's the
yeah.
power of story, right? Of pulling someone in and helping them feel like, well, I can relate to that. That speaks a little bit to me. I feel included into that. And wow, I think with that, we can continue to change the world. Chantelle, what else stands out to you
Yeah.
as we pull pull these key nuggets out?
Well, you know me, I'm always asking all of my clients, everyone I know, who are you? Right? So the biggest thing that stands out to me is, what do you want to be celebrated for? And why don't you be celebrated for you? We are totally diverse. We are all so different. Why do we spend our lives trying to fit in? Why don't we just be celebrated for who we are? Unique, quirky, different, out there. Doesn't matter. It's who you are. Love it.
Actually, it brings me back. I just thought the one bit about pronouns I didn't finish was the they them thing, because you'll notice I use they them as
Yes.
pronouns. So if I say that, and a lot of people say, "Oh, that's not that's plural." No, we use they them all the time. Someone's left their mobile phone. Could you give it to them? If we don't know someone's gender,
Yes.
we automatically use they them. So
It's true.
that's one of the ingredients. So I just suddenly realized I hadn't actually properly finished off the answer. Now I got into another story.
It's the power of stories, right? We get even caught, we just get so drawn even into some of our own because it's a way to reconnect
Yeah.
to something that is important and powerful for us.
Yeah.
So thank you,
Mm.
Rikki, for taking us up on this conversation and the sharing and all that you are doing to support others. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
For all the listeners and watchers, thank you for taking a chance on this opportunity to continue the conversation, to share in those stories, mostly unpolished, right? The real stuff, the stuff beyond the spotlight. And we are delighted to continue this conversation. So stay tuned for more to come. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.